So 30 plus years ago, when you took the job, what was the typical, and pick a burn degree, what was the typical treatment protocol that you saw being administered in the burn centers?
First of all, the burn centers received the worst of the worst. The majority of burns at that point, over 2 million a year, were treated in emergency departments, doctors' offices, or just regular, hospitals.
Yeah.
They didn't go to a burn center. The burns that went to the burn center were the ones that were typically life-threatening. So these were deep second degree and third degree burn survivors. Anywhere from 15% of their body to 90%. So the treatment they were getting back then in a burn center, as I said earlier, involved early on debridement, and that's getting rid of the damaged and dying skin that remains on the body.
And that gives the new growing skin a chance
that provides a bed for regrowth, where regrowth can happen. And in third degree burned areas, regrowth won't happen. The deep second degrees and second degree burns, those will typically regenerate with varying degrees of scarring depending on how deep it is. The third degree area, different story. So after the debridement process, which could take days to a week, those who survived that were ready for the next phase, and that involved covering those burns. In fact, the sooner the better. In some cases, that happens almost immediately upon the end of debridement. You have to think of the body like a house, and your skin is the roof or the covering. And a day like in the middle of winter, cold outside, you knock a 15% of that roof off, put a hole in it, the heat's going to flow out.
Yeah.
So hypothermia becomes a real problem, and outside elements can flow in. Infection becomes a real problem. So stabilization following debridement, in fact, actually at the same time debridement's being done. Stabilization, getting enough calories in, because you're losing extraordinary numbers of calories through the burned area. So making sure that intravenously or however enough calories are going in to stabilize the core functions of the body and to prevent the injection or introduction of infection is the next phase. And the way you get a heads up on that is to provide a covering to the lost skin. That typically starts out with some kind of an artificial covering.
Like a gauze or?
Well, yeah, it's
artificial skin?
There's clean, sterile dressings put on, obviously. But when I say a covering, I mean synthetic skin, or in some cases, animal skin is used, and it's temporary. This is not going to adhere. It's not going to become your new skin. That's the tricky part of healing someone who has serious burn injuries. The third degree area is eventually going to need to be grafted. And grafting involves harvesting healthy skin from another part of that person's body and placing it on the area where the skin has been destroyed.
Now, what about skin donors? I'm an organ donor, and I'm a proud organ donor. And I know, people think of organ donors with heart and lungs and liver, but skin, eyes, right, corneas. Is that a candidate? So a harvesting of skin off of somebody who's lost their life?
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's a temporary covering because our body will not assimilate skin from another body.
Really?
It's a temporary covering
Mm-hmm.
that will help stem that loss of calories and protect from injection of bacteria and so forth. But eventually, it's going to have to be replaced with your own skin.
So the grafting process that you're talking about is actually they're taking skin from other parts of your body.
What the survivor is having to undergo is a secondary injury.
I'm sure that is not pleasant.
No, it's painful, and it has to go through the same healing process as the burn. Now, the graft is not as deep.
So it's not a third degree.
It's not third. No, it's not as deep, and it will regenerate on its own. But again, if you have a 50% burn or more, you have limited areas where you can harvest grafted skin and transfer it. So the process, beginning years ago and still used today, is putting that harvested skin, the graft, through a machinery that actually cuts little slits in it. And when it comes out the other end, it can be stretched up to 7 times its normal size. And now you can take a small 2x2 section of skin and turn it into enough to cover a good bit of one's back and transplant it. The drawback is because of all those little slits, you get a waffled appearance once it adheres and grows. So you don't get clean, smooth skin. You get that mottled look. And that's part of the scarring issues that have to be dealt with later. And the impact, particularly if it's on the face or in a highly visible area, that transcends from physically surviving the burn to psychologically and emotionally surviving the burn. And that's a whole other discipline.
Well, you'd mentioned is when you were going through the disciplines in the burn team, as you called it, you had mentioned therapists on that team. So I'm assuming now, based on what you just said, especially if that waffling is on the face area, it's the therapy that one might go through to emotionally and mentally prepare themselves to look at what they're going to look like post burn and post procedure.
Them and their families and others. It's just imagine that your wife was burned and she was taken off to the hospital and she's been in critical care for days, and now you're seeing her for the first time and she no longer looks like your wife. Yeah, she's maybe missing an ear, part of a nose, her extensive scarring. That creates emotional trauma on not just the survivor, but on the family. So counseling is a critical part of burn recovery, and you just can't separate that out. Yeah.
So Dan, if somebody wants to find the Burn Prevention Network online, where can we find you?
Our website is burnprevention.org.
Burnprevention.org.
Very easy.
I know that, so you've got education, you've got training, you've got staff that's going out and delivering that, but you also have a very unique opportunity called Camp Susquehanna. Tell me about the camp. How long has it been going? What's the purpose of the camp? Who attends the camp? Tell me a little about that.
Camp Susquehanna has been in existence for over 20 years. Excuse me. We have had administrative and operational control for the last 4. And we were invited to come in to expand this operation. Camp Susquehanna exists to help survivors do the very thing we've been talking about, Dave, and that is come to terms with their new reality. The fact that they have scars that will be visible for the rest of their life. They may be missing digits. They may not have the mobility in their joint areas that they once had. These are all aspects of reality for them that make it difficult for them to fit into their past life or to what most of us consider a normal life. For children, it's particularly tough because their peers are just notoriously abrupt and cruel. Not necessarily because they are trying to be cruel, but they don't have the filters that some adults develop over time. So a child who's wearing a face mask to flatten facial scars will generate a lot of questions and sometimes very hurtful responses from people. These children need a place to go to be with other burn survivors where they don't have to worry about being on guard, where they can just be a child again. Camp Susquehanna provides that place. It provides the outdoor activities that any camp would for children at that age. Swimming, boating, fishing, hiking, doing outdoor things, nature, and so forth. But they're doing it with people who look like them, and they're doing it under the guidance of a specialized team that we recruit, who include burn nurses, therapists, firefighters, psychosocial professionals, and other burn survivors, adult burn survivors who've traveled the pathway that these young people are traveling. We obviously want to provide fun for these kids, but more deeply, we want to help them build self-esteem. We want to engender in them coping skills, and we want to provide for them a lifelong network that they can draw on as they confront challenges in their young years and growing into teen and adult years. So they have the resilience to be all they can be. And Camp Susquehanna has done a marvelous job of doing all those things in the last 20 some years. Our graduates have become, many of them have become quite successful. And they've transitioned from being ashamed of themselves to looking at their scars as badges of valor and something to be proud of.
Sure.
They're not burn victims any longer. They're burn survivors. And a survivor is something to be proud of.
What are the age ranges of children that attend the camp?
Lower age range is 7 and up to 18. And then we have a leader in training program as part of Camp Susquehanna, which begins at 18 through 21. After 21, they're eligible, if they wish, to apply to become part of the staff for Camp Susquehanna. And we have a number of people who've gone through from camper to leader in training to staff member.
So many of the kids come back year after year.
Most of the kids come back year after year. Many of them will tell you that their Camp Susquehanna friends are their other family because they understand, unlike even sometimes the siblings and parents of these kids, they understand what they've been through and they can discuss things with them that they can't discuss with other people.
Yeah. So when you see the face of a first-time camper, now let me ask you this: do the parents drop them off and say, "Okay, honey, we'll see you in a week," or are the parents invited to stay? How does that work?
Most of the children that come to Camp Susquehanna, which by the way is situated in the Catskills up in the very northeast corner of Pennsylvania at a wonderful facility called Camp Westmont. Most of the children that arrive at Camp Westmont come on buses that we provide. We run a bus from Pittsburgh through the middle of the state that picks up children along the way, and we run a bus from Philadelphia up to the northeast section and over. So the parents are typically dropping them off in Pittsburgh, in State College, Lewistown, Philadelphia, Allentown, or if they're close enough, a few may drop them off at camp, but the vast majority come in by bus. So the camp experience begins the moment they get on that bus, and they reunite, sometimes for the first time in almost a year, with their friends from camp. And the party begins right then. And by the time they get to camp, they're acclimated, they're excited, and then we greet them with a team of people that some of them have known over the years, some of them are meeting for the first time. But on that team are 4 specialized crisis therapy teams consisting of a trainer and a crisis therapy dog. And right off the bus, one of these dogs is there with tail wagging, greeting them. It's like coming home. And these are special groups of owner or handler and dog who are very, very sensitive to the needs of people. And they're just integral parts of our team at Camp Susquehanna, that we have never had a problem with homesickness, with kids wanting to go home. And my previous career was with the Boy Scouts of America, where I directed summer camp operations for as many as 2,000 kids a week. We always had problems with homesickness. That was one of our biggest problems. Camp Susquehanna, our problem is they don't want to go back home.
Yeah.
They love being there so much.
Yeah. So what does a typical day at the camp look like? The kids get up in the morning and there's breakfast and then a day full of activities, I'm sure. So take me through, you mentioned some of the fun things that they can be involved in, the canoeing and the hiking and fishing and things like that. What are some of the other things that a child could go through at the camp outside of those typical fun things I mentioned?
Sure. First of all, our kids are grouped into age teams. So they stay in cabins with children their own age range, 4 different age ranges, and then segregated male-female. And each grouping has a counselor or a team leader with them, an adult at all times, at least 2 at all times. So most of the activities that happen during the day are with their age group. And then they come together for camp-wide activities as well. But like you say, they start out with breakfast. We have elective tracks, which include an outdoor or an indoor activity. So they can choose whether they want to go to the kitchen and learn cooking skills, or they want to go to the lake and do fishing, or canoeing, or motorboating. Or there's a huge trampoline thing in the water they can climb up and jump into, and it throws them into the air and into the water.
Do you participate in that?
The staff does. I photograph it.
Okay, all right.
We actually have a high ropes course where they test their courage, and that's important, that they develop self-reliance and to trust themselves. Where they go up 30, 40 feet and they're traversing distances, rappelling on ropes, on slides, climbing rope ladders that are shaking back and forth. And this is all tightly controlled with a professionally trained staff of people that do that. There's a high wire area where we actually have a trapeze and a net, and we teach them how to swing and transfer from one trapeze to another, something other kids are not going to get.
Sure.
So this is something you go home and say, do you know how to do a trapeze routine, 40 feet off the ground?
I bet not.
Yeah. But in the midst of these activities, which include karate, nature skills, camping skills, color wars where they're competing against another team doing fun things. We have activities like the talking stick. The talking stick is a camp-wide activity, and it's restricted to the campers and the staff. So we don't have visitors sitting in on this. And there's a ceremonial stick that goes from camp season to camp season to camp season. And when it's passed to you, you have the opportunity to either pass it on to someone else or to say something you want to say. And this is one of the most meaningful experiences that I've been privileged to sit in on at camp, because this is where kids pour out their heart. And they talk about what they deal with in their daily life, their friends at home, their family. They talk about how hard it was, how hard it is. And it's so therapeutic, because you'll watch 4 or 5 little 7 or 8 year olds just get up and circle their friend who's talking and just reach out and put their hands on his shoulder while he's crying, talking about how the people at school call him a crispy critter or a Freddy Krueger. And they're just lifting him up. And that process of lifting him up lifts them up too. They're finding out that they're not alone. And for many of these kids, they've never seen another burn survivor in their hometown. But they're surrounded with people that understand them now. And it's very emotional. It's exhausting at the end for the staff as well as the kids. But these kids emerge different. And the parents tell us that when they come home. That I sent a little boy or a little girl to camp, and I got the child I knew before back when they came home.